The city of Rome had always carried the weight of its past. Every stone held stories older than memory. Among them, the Colosseum stood the tallest, a symbol of power, spectacle, and silence. Tourists came every day, exploring its ancient walls, taking photos under broken arches. But they never realized what they saw was only half of what once existed. No one questioned it. Not really. The Colosseum was incomplete, worn down by centuries of earthquakes, wars, and neglect. That was the official story, repeated in guidebooks and lectures. Yet there was always something unsettling about its asymmetry, as though the ruin had not been destroyed, but carefully divided. Elias Verne noticed it, the first time he stood before it at dusk. The golden light of the setting sun fell unevenly across the structure, illuminating one side, while leaving the other in a strange, unnatural darkness. It was not the kind of shadow cast by buildings or clouds. It seemed deeper, heavier, as if it absorbed light, rather than simply blocking it. He had come to Rome as a historian, specializing in ancient architecture. His work was rooted in logic, in measurements and records, in things that could be proven. But something about the Colosseum resisted explanation. The symmetry was wrong. The damage was too precise, in places where chaos should have ruled. Locals rarely spoke about it, beyond rehearsed facts. But one evening, in a narrow cafe tucked away from the crowds, Elias overheard something that would change everything. An old man sat near the window, his voice low but urgent, as he spoke to the cafe owner. His words were in Italian, but Elias understood enough to catch fragments. Something about the other side. Something about it not being gone, only hidden. The cafe owner dismissed him with a tired wave, but the old man insisted, his voice trembling with conviction. Elias approached him cautiously. The old man's eyes were sharp despite his age, reflecting something that felt like both fear and certainty. When Elias asked about the Colosseum, the man studied him for a long moment before speaking again. He spoke of a second structure, identical yet inverted, existing beyond what could be seen. Not destroyed, not lost, but separated. According to him, the Colosseum had never been whole in the way people believed. It had been divided deliberately, long ago, for reasons buried deeper than history books could reach. Elias wanted to dismiss it as myth, the kind that clings to ancient places. But the old man's details were too specific, too deliberate. He described corridors that did not appear on any map, entrances sealed not by stone, but by something else entirely. He spoke of a boundary that could not be crossed unless it allowed you. The idea lingered in Elias's mind long after their conversation ended. That night, he returned to the Colosseum alone. The crowds were gone, replaced by silence that seemed to stretch across centuries. The structure loomed against the night sky, its arches like hollow eyes staring into nothing. Elias walked along the perimeter, his footsteps echoing softly against the ancient ground. He reached the darker side. Up close, the difference was undeniable. The air felt colder, heavier. The stone here was smoother in places, as if worn not by time, but by contact. He ran his hand along the surface and felt a faint vibration. So subtle, he almost convinced himself it was his imagination. almost. Then he noticed the gap. It was not visible from a distance, but standing close, he saw a narrow seam in the wall, too straight to be natural. It ran vertically, disappearing into shadow above and below. Elias leaned closer, his pulse quickening. There was something beyond it. Not darkness, not emptiness. Something else. He pressed his hand against the seam. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the vibration returned, stronger this time, traveling through his fingers and up his arm. The air shifted, carrying a faint sound that did not belong to the present. A roar. Not of wind, not of the city, but of something alive. Thousands of voices, distant yet overwhelming, rising and falling in a rhythm that echoed through the stone itself. Elias stepped back, his breath catching. The seam shimmered, barely visible, like heat rising from sunlit ground. For an instant, he thought he saw movement within it. Shapes, shadows, figures that flickered in and out of existence. The missing half was not gone. It was still there, hidden, separated by something that blurred the line between reality and memory. Elias knew, in that moment, that the Colosseum was not just a ruin. It was a boundary. And something on the other side was waiting. Elias did not sleep that night. The sound he had heard, if it could even be called a sound, refused to leave him. It lingered in his ears, like an echo trapped inside bone, something deeper than memory. He returned to his small apartment near the Tiber, but Rome itself felt altered, as though the city had shifted, ever so slightly out of alignment. By morning, reason tried to reclaim him. He told himself it had been fatigue, a trick of acoustics. The Colosseum was ancient, full of hidden chambers and tunnels. Sounds could travel in strange ways through its structure. His mind, primed by the old man's story, had simply filled in the gaps. But logic faltered when confronted with one undeniable fact. He had felt something. Not just heard, not just imagined. The vibration in the stone had been real, precise, almost responsive. Elias returned before noon, blending in with the tourists this time. Cameras flashed, guides spoke in rehearsed enthusiasm, and children ran across worn pathways that had once seen blood. Everything looked normal again. Too normal. He moved carefully toward the darker side, pretending to examine the structure, as any historian might. When he reached the seam, it was gone. There was only stone. He stared at it, confusion tightening his chest. He traced the surface with his fingers, searching for the line he had seen so clearly the night before. But the wall was solid, uninterrupted. He stepped back, scanning the area. Nothing. No shift in air. No strange weight pressing against his senses. Just sunlight, noise, and ordinary reality. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had he imagined it entirely? Then he noticed something else. A faint marking on the ground, almost invisible beneath layers of dust and footsteps. It wasn't ancient. It was recent. A symbol scratched lightly into the stone floor, just near where he had stood the night before. It resembled a circle divided vertically, two halves. Elias crouched, examining it more closely. The line dividing the circle was not straight. It twisted slightly near the center, as though something had resisted being separated. He felt a presence behind him. Not a sound, not a touch, but an awareness that made the air feel thinner. He turned slowly. The old man from the cafe stood a few steps away. He had appeared so quietly that Elias hadn't noticed him approach. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the same intensity as before. He nodded toward the symbol on the ground. It had been seen, he said quietly, by others before him. Elias asked what it meant. The old man did not answer immediately. Instead, he gestured for Elias to stand, then began walking toward one of the less crowded corridors. After a moment's hesitation, Elias followed. They moved through shadowed passages, where the noise of tourists faded into a distant hum. The air grew cooler, the light dimmer. The old man finally spoke again. The Colosseum had never been a single structure. That was the first truth. It had been built as two, not side by side, but intertwined. Two realities, occupying the same space, separated by a boundary that was not entirely physical. One visible, one hidden. Elias listened, his skepticism struggling to keep pace with his curiosity. Why? He asked. The old man stopped walking. To contain something. The answer came without hesitation, and it settled heavily between them. Long before Rome reached its height, before emperors and spectacles, there had been something discovered beneath the earth at that very location. Not a structure, not a civilization, but something older, something that did not belong to the world above. The Romans had not built the Colosseum merely as an arena. They had built it as a lock. The visible half was only a shell. The hidden half was the mechanism. Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air. And the games? He said. The old man nodded slowly. Not entertainment. Not entirely. The energy of the crowds, the violence, the emotion, it had all served a purpose. A way to maintain the separation, to keep whatever lay beneath contained. But over time, the knowledge had been lost. The rituals had become spectacle, then memory, then ruin. The lock had weakened. Elias's thoughts raced. And now? The old man looked at him, his expression darkening. Now, it was beginning to open. A distant sound echoed through the corridor. It was faint, but unmistakable. The same roar Elias had heard the night before, only this time It was closer. Both men turned toward the source, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. Something on the other side had noticed them. The sound did not fade. It lingered in the corridor, like a breath held too long, pressing against the silence, until even the walls seemed to strain under its weight. Elias felt it in his chest, more than his ears, a low vibration that stirred something instinctive and uneasy inside him. The old man turned sharply, his composure slipping for the first time. Too soon, he muttered, almost to himself. Elias stepped closer, to the direction of the sound. The corridor ahead curved into darkness, a section of the Colosseum rarely visited, closed off by chains and small warning signs, meant more for formality than enforcement. But something about that space felt different now. The air was thicker, charged. The roar came again. This time, it was layered. Voices upon voices, not in harmony, but in chaos. Screams, cheers, chants, all blending into something that was not quite human anymore. Elias felt his pulse spike. It was not an echo of the past. It was happening. The old man grabbed his arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You must not go further," he said. But Elias pulled away. Every instinct, as a historian, as a seeker of truth, drove him forward. Fear coiled in his stomach, but it was outweighed by something stronger: the need to understand. He ducked under the chain. The temperature dropped instantly. Behind him, the sounds of the modern world seemed to collapse, as though a door had quietly shut. The corridor ahead stretched, longer than it should have, the curvature subtly shifting. Elias slowed, noticing how the stone beneath his feet felt smoother, less worn. Not older. Different. The old man followed reluctantly, his footsteps echoing with urgency. "You do not understand what you are stepping into," he warned. Elias glanced back. "Then help me understand." The old man hesitated, then exhaled slowly, as if surrendering to something inevitable. "There had been a group," he said. "Not priests, not soldiers, but something between the two. They had no name, in the way modern orders did. But they were known by a symbol. The divided circle Elias had seen. They were the keepers. Their purpose was not to worship, nor to rule, but to maintain the boundary. They understood that the Colosseum was not simply built upon the earth, but anchored into something beneath it. Something vast. Elias asked what that something was. The old man shook his head. "Not a creature," he said. "Not in the way we understand. More like a presence, a force. It fed on something intangible, emotion, intensity, conflict. The arena had been designed to provide it, to sustain it in a controlled way, like feeding a fire, just enough to keep it contained. Elias felt a growing unease, and if it was not fed, the old man's silence was answer enough. They reached the end of the corridor, or what should have been the end. Instead of a wall, there was a wide archway. Elias froze. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this archway had not been here before. Beyond it lay the arena, but not the one he had seen earlier. This one was whole, perfect. The Colosseum stood complete, its structure unbroken, its tiers rising in flawless symmetry. Sunlight poured into the space, but the angle was wrong. The colour too rich, too golden, as though the sky itself had been altered. The stands were filled. Thousands of figures sat in silence, not moving, not speaking, watching. Elias's breath caught. They were not tourists, not modern people. Their clothing, their posture, their stillness, it all belonged to another time, or something pretending to be. The arena floor below was empty, but stained. Dark patches marked the sand, in patterns that felt deliberate, almost ritualistic. "This is the other half," the old man whispered. Elias stepped forward slowly, crossing the threshold. The moment he did, the sound returned, louder, clearer. The crowd began to move, not all at once, but in waves, like a ripple passing through water. Heads turned, eyes shifting toward him. Thousands of eyes. Elias staggered slightly, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of attention. "They see you," the old man said. His voice trembled. That should not be possible. A figure appeared at the center of the arena. It had not been there before. Elias blinked, trying to understand what he was seeing. The figure was human in shape, but something about it was wrong. Its proportions were slightly off. Its movements too smooth, too precise. It raised its head slowly, looking directly at Elias, and smiled. The crowd erupted. The roar surged upward, deafening, filling every inch of space. It was not just sound. It was pressure, force, something that pushed against Elias's body and mind simultaneously. He tried to step back. He could not. The ground beneath his feet felt fixed, holding him in place. The figure in the arena took a step forward, then another. Elias realized, with a growing sense of dread, that it was not walking across the sand. It was moving toward him, across the space between worlds. The old man shouted something, but the words were lost in the roar. The air distorted, the boundary flickering like a failing barrier. For a brief moment, Elias saw both versions of the Colosseum at once, the ruined present and the perfect other half, overlapping in impossible geometry. The figure reached the edge of the arena, and then everything snapped.
The sound vanished. The light shifted. Elias stumbled backward, collapsing onto cold stone. The archway was gone. The corridor was empty. The old man stood over him, breathing heavily. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Elias looked up, his voice barely steady. "It saw me." The old man nodded slowly. "Yes. And now it knows."
That night, Elias returned to the cafe. The old man was already there, waiting. This time, there was no hesitation between them. The distance of strangers had vanished, replaced by something more urgent, more dangerous. The old man introduced himself at last. Lucian. He had been a keeper once, not by choice, but by inheritance. His family had guarded fragments of the knowledge for generations, long after the original order had dissolved into obscurity. He showed Elias something he had never revealed to anyone outside the order. A small, worn journal. Its pages were filled with diagrams, symbols, and notes written in multiple languages spanning centuries. At its center was a recurring image, the divided circle, always accompanied by variations of the same concept: balance, containment, exchange. Elias studied the pages, his mind racing. The Colosseum had not simply contained the presence beneath it, it had regulated it. The games had served as a controlled release, a way to prevent build-up. But once the games ended, once the structure fell into ruin, that balance had been disrupted. The hidden half had begun to awaken. Lucian explained that the keepers had attempted to maintain the boundary through other means: rituals, gatherings, subtle manipulations of space and energy. But over time, their numbers had dwindled, their knowledge fragmented. Now, only traces remained, and the boundary was failing. Elias realized something then. It had reacted to him. Not randomly, not accidentally. He asked why. Lucian's expression grew grave. Because you crossed, without permission. No one had done that in centuries. And now, the other side was aware again. Elias felt the weight of those words settle over him. What happens next? Lucian closed the journal, slowly. Now, it begins to reach back.
Rome did not sleep that night. Or perhaps it did, and only Elias remained awake, to feel the subtle shift beneath its surface. The city above moved, as it always had. Cars passing, voices drifting, lights flickering in distant windows. But beneath it, something ancient had stirred. Elias followed Lucian through a narrow street, long after midnight, away from the familiar paths of tourists and into a quieter, older part of the city. The buildings here leaned inward, their walls whispering of centuries past.
At the end of the street stood a door, so unremarkable it might have gone unnoticed forever.
Lucien paused before it, his hand resting lightly against the wood. "This was never meant to be found," he said. "Then why show me?" Lucien glanced back, his eyes reflecting something heavier than fear. "Because it already has." The door opened without resistance. Inside, a steep staircase descended into darkness. The air that rose from below carried a scent unlike anything Elias had encountered before. Not decay, not dampness, but something mineral and metallic, as if the earth itself had been disturbed too deeply. They descended in silence. The staircase spiraled farther than it should have, each step echoing faintly. The sound swallowed almost immediately by the surrounding dark. After what felt like far too long, the stairs ended. Elias stepped into a vast underground chamber. His breath caught. This was no ordinary ruin. The space stretched outward in every direction, supported by massive stone pillars, carved with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly under the dim light of scattered lanterns. At the center of the chamber lay a structure, unlike anything he had ever seen. It resembled a machine, but it was not made of metal. Stone, bronze, and something else, something darker, were woven together into a complex system of rings, channels, and interconnected segments. It extended downward into a deep shaft that seemed to have no visible end. Elias approached slowly, drawn toward it. "What is this?" Lucien joined him, his voice quiet. "The heart of the Colosseum." Elias examined the structure more closely. The rings were aligned in precise intervals, each etched with symbols similar to those in Lucien's journal. Some of them were glowing faintly, their light pulsing in a slow, uneven rhythm. Others were dark, broken. "It is not just a boundary," Lucien continued. "It is a regulator. It controls the flow between the two halves." Elias's mind began to piece it together. The arena above had been the visible component. The spectacle, the energy, the emotion. It all fed into this mechanism. It was processed, directed, contained. But now it is failing, Elias said. Lucien nodded. The balance is gone. The flow has become unstable. Elias reached out, stopping just short of touching one of the rings. He could feel the energy radiating from it, a low hum that resonated through his bones. What happens if it stops working entirely? Lucien did not answer immediately. Instead, he pointed toward the shaft at the center of the structure. Elias stepped closer and looked down. There was no bottom, only darkness. But not empty darkness. Something moved within it.
slowly, vastly. Elias stepped back, his pulse racing. "That is where it is anchored," Lucian said. "Not beneath the Colosseum, beneath everything." Elias struggled to process the scale of it. "And the other half?" he asked. Lucian turned his gaze upward, as though he could see through layers of earth and stone. "The other half is not below. It is adjacent, overlapping. The mechanism does not hold it down. It keeps it separate." Elias felt a cold realization settle in. And that separation is breaking. Before Lucian could respond, a sound echoed through the chamber. Footsteps. Not theirs. Both men turned. From the shadows between the pillars, figures began to emerge. At first, Elias thought they were reflections, distortions caused by the dim light. But as they stepped closer, their forms became clear. They were people, dressed in dark, uniform clothing, their movements coordinated, deliberate. Each of them bore the same symbol, the divided circle, marked subtly on their sleeves. Lucian's expression hardened. They are not supposed to be here. One of the figures stepped forward. A woman, her posture calm, her gaze fixed directly on Elias. Her voice was steady. "You should not have brought him." Lucian moved slightly, in front of Elias. "You should not exist anymore." The woman's expression did not change. "We adapted." Elias looked between them, confusion rising. "Who are they?" Lucian's answer came, with quiet tension. "The last of the keepers." The woman shook her head. "No, not the last. The true ones." She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving Elias. "We have been maintaining what remains of the mechanism. Without us, the boundary would have collapsed already." Elias frowned. "Then why is it failing?" For the first time, something flickered in her expression. "Because it is no longer enough." She turned slightly, gesturing toward the structure. "The original system required more than maintenance. It required input." Elias understood immediately. The games, the energy. She nodded. "We have tried alternatives, controlled events, emotional convergence, but nothing matches the scale of what was lost." Lucian's voice cut in sharply. "So you would bring it back?" Her silence was answer enough. Elias felt a surge of disbelief. "You cannot be serious." She met his gaze. "It is not a question of morality. It is a question of survival." The ground beneath them trembled. Light pulsed violently through the rings of the mechanism, spreading outward in uneven waves. A deep sound rose from the shaft, louder than before, closer. Elias felt it again. That presence, watching, reaching. The woman's voice sharpened. "It is accelerating." Lucian turned to her. Then help us stabilize it. She hesitated, then shook her head. We cannot stabilize it. Not anymore. Elias's voice came out steady, despite everything.
Then what can you do? The woman looked at him with something that was almost pity. We can open it. Silence fell. The meaning settled heavily between them. Lucian's reaction was immediate. No. Elias felt his heart pound. Open it? She nodded. Controlled access. A full reconnection of both halves. It would reset the system. Rebalance the flow. Lucian stepped forward, anger breaking through. Or release it entirely. Her gaze did not waver. That risk already exists. The difference is whether we face it blindly or on our terms. The chamber shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling. The light from the mechanism surged, then flickered erratically. Elias realized something then. It was not just reaching. It was responding. To him. He stepped closer to the mechanism, ignoring Lucian's warning. The rings shifted slightly as he approached, their glow intensifying. The woman's eyes widened. It is reacting to him. Lucian turned sharply. That is not possible. Elias felt the pull again. Stronger now. Like a current, drawing him forward. Images flickered at the edge of his vision. The arena, the crowd, the figure at its center. Waiting. He understood. Not fully, but enough. It does not need the games, he said slowly. Both Lucian and the woman stared at him. It needs connection. The chamber fell silent again. The idea hung in the air, fragile but undeniable. The mechanism pulsed once more. This time, in rhythm with his heartbeat. And somewhere, beyond the boundary, something answered. The rhythm did not stop. Elias stood at the edge of the mechanism, every pulse of light matching the beat in his chest. It was no longer subtle. The structure beneath the Colosseum was responding to him with unmistakable intent, as if something within it had finally found what it had been waiting for. Lucian moved closer, his voice low but urgent. Step away from it. Elias did not move. He could feel something unfolding inside his mind. Not a thought, not a memory, but a presence brushing against the edges of his awareness. It was not forcing its way in. It was inviting. The woman watched carefully, her composure now edged with tension. What are you feeling? Elias hesitated, searching for words that felt insufficient. It is not like before, he said. It is clearer, focused. He placed his hand against one of the glowing rings. This time, he did not pull away. The reaction was immediate. Light surged through the mechanism, racing along its channels,
in expanding patterns. The chamber trembled, but the motion felt controlled, deliberate, rather than chaotic. And then, the world shifted. Elias did not lose consciousness.
He did not fall, but the chamber vanished. He stood once more in the arena. The complete Colosseum rose around him, its towering structure flawless, untouched by time. The sky above glowed with that same unnatural gold, suspended between day and dusk. But this time, he was not at the edge. He stood at the center. The sand beneath his feet was warm, textured, marked by countless impressions. The stains he had seen before were clearer now, dark, layered, embedded deeply into the ground. The crowd surrounded him, not silent anymore. They whispered. Thousands of voices, overlapping, forming a constant murmur that seemed to circle him from every direction. The words were not in any language he recognized, yet he understood their tone. Expectation, anticipation, hunger. Elias turned slowly. The figure stood across from him, closer now, more defined. It was still shaped like a human, but the illusion was thinner this time. Its form shifted subtly, as if struggling to maintain a consistent appearance. Its face was almost clear, almost familiar, but never stable enough to recognize. It took a step forward. The crowd responded instantly, the murmur rising into a roar that shook the air itself. Elias felt it again, that pull, stronger than ever. "You brought me here," he said, his voice steady, despite everything. The figure tilted its head slightly, not in confusion, in acknowledgement. The realization struck Elias with sudden clarity. No, you brought me. The roar intensified. The figure's form sharpened for a brief moment, and Elias saw something within it. Layers upon layers of impressions, like countless faces overlapping in a single shape. It was not one entity. It was many. Every voice, every emotion, every moment that had ever filled this place had not vanished. It had been collected, absorbed, sustained. The arena was not feeding something separate. It had become the thing itself. The figure stepped closer. The distance between them shortened, though Elias could not see it, crossing the space. The ground beneath him vibrated. The crowd leaned forward, in unison. And then, for the first time, the figure spoke. Not with a voice, with meaning. It needed balance. Elias felt the concept form directly in his mind, clear and undeniable. Not destruction, not escape. Balance. It showed him something. Flashes of time,
rapid and overwhelming. The Colosseum filled with life, the games unfolding, the mechanism below pulsing in perfect synchronization. Energy flowing, contained, sustained. Then the collapse, the silence, the imbalance growing over centuries. The hunger. Elias staggered slightly under the weight of it. "You are not trying to break free," he said slowly. Another pulse of meaning. Not break. Merge. The word echoed through him, carrying a depth that went beyond simple understanding. The separation was the problem. The division between the two halves had become unstable. The system no longer functioned as it was designed. It did not want to destroy the boundary. It wanted to remove the need for one. Elias felt a chill. If the two halves merged completely, he saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. Rome shifting, reality bending, the distinction between past and present dissolving, the arena expanding beyond its physical limits, spreading its influence outward. Not as a sudden catastrophe, as a gradual transformation. Everything becoming part of the same system. The same presence. Elias shook his head. That is not balance. The figure stepped closer again. The crowd roared in response. Another wave of meaning struck him, stronger this time. Balance was not about separation. It was about flow. The original system had forced that flow through controlled means. Now, it sought a different path. Elias realized something terrifying. It had adapted. The woman's voice echoed faintly in his memory. We adapted. The keepers had not been the only ones evolving. Elias looked at the figure again. Why me? The answer came instantly. You crossed. Not just physically. Something in him had aligned with the mechanism, with the boundary itself. He had not forced his way through. It had allowed him, chosen him. The realization tightened his chest. You need me. Another pulse. Yes. Elias understood now. The mechanism below was failing because it lacked a focal point, a connector, something capable of linking both halves without collapsing the system entirely. A bridge. He took a slow breath. And if I refuse? The crowd fell silent. For the first time since he arrived, the arena stilled completely. The figure stopped moving. The response came more slowly this time. Then it ends. The simplicity of it carried more weight than any threat. Elias felt the truth of it. The system would collapse. The boundary would break. But not in a controlled way. In chaos. The arena flickered. For a brief moment, Elias saw the underground chamber overlapping with this place, the mechanism pulsing wildly. Lucian and the woman watching from opposite sides. Time was thinning. The connection was deepening. He did not have long. The figure extended something toward him. Not a hand. An opening. An invitation. Join. The word echoed through him, carrying not just meaning, but possibility. Elias hesitated, not out of fear, out of understanding. If he accepted, he would not remain unchanged. He would become part of it, a living connection between worlds, a mind stretched across both realities. The weight of that choice pressed heavily against him. And somewhere, beyond the roar, beyond the presence, beyond the impossible structure surrounding him, he remembered something simple, human. Choice was not just about survival, it was about consequence. Elias lowered his gaze briefly, then looked back up, and made his decision.
Elias did not take the offering, but he did not reject it either. Instead, he stepped forward. The distance between him and the figure collapsed instantly, as though space itself had folded. The crowd inhaled as one, the sound pulling inward rather than expanding outward. Elias raised his hand, not in acceptance, in interruption. Something is wrong, he said, forcing the thought outward with as much clarity as he could. The figure paused, not confused, curious. Elias felt the connection tighten, as though it were focusing entirely on him now. This system, he continued, the Colosseum, the mechanism, the separation, it was never meant to last forever. Images flickered again, but this time they were slower, more deliberate. Construction. Design. The original architects, not just Roman engineers, but something more. Individuals who understood what lay beneath the world in ways that modern knowledge had long forgotten. They had not built a prison. They had built a delay. The realization struck Elias with a force that almost broke his concentration. You were never meant to stay contained, he said. The figure's form shifted. The crowd reacted with a ripple of unease. The system was supposed to evolve, Elias continued. The separation was only phase 1, a way to prevent collapse until something else could be established. The connection surged.